The use of AI, data science and machine learning is subject to great public scrutiny, of course, but does that undermine its power to improve society? As attention risks being overly focused on the negative consequences of data abuse and exploitation. As data proliferates and becomes more freely available, how can we leverage data's potential to help solve some of the most difficult social and environmental problems? Let's join UNICEF's Director of Data for Children, Alex Hutchison, Managing Director for AI for Good and Techfugees Ambassador, Alice Piterova, and founder of AI for Peace, Branka Panic, with moderator Maria Luciana Axente, as they explore the use of AI and data science for the greater good.
Are we live? Good morning, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. So delighted to be here for a session that is very close to my heart. How do we use AI for good? And while it's a topic that we've been discussing for close to 4 or 5 years now, and we managed to raise awareness and educate so many different stakeholders about the importance of focusing on not only on AI delivering profit and value, but also focusing on social causes. Today, I have 3 amazing superwomen, which will tell you all about how they are using data science and AI in their own domain of work. And obviously, hopefully, we will have an interesting conversation helped by your questions. And be able to really see and taste if AI is really used for the good. And if it's not, what do we need to do to promote this? I'll start first with Alex, right? Alex, you're a superhero, right? You are working for Data for Children Collaborative, which is UNICEF and Scottish Government University of Edinburgh initiatives. And you are innovating, looking at how to use data science techniques to improve children's lives. I would want to pose a provocation to you. If that's the case, if we can use artificial intelligence and data science to improve the children's life, how can we do it in a sustainable manner? How can we add the ethical lenses early on in the design and make sure that ethical consideration are not just a tick box exercise, but in fact is a behavior that manifests itself throughout the build but also use? And how do we stimulate that ethical behavior of everyone involved in using data science in AI?
Thanks, Maria, and thanks for WEDF for having me along today. So great question around, I think I often use the phrase ethical tick box exercises, and they frustrate me a lot. And I'm wondering how the audience feels about that phrase and how practical solutions can be implemented around these AI projects. So within the Data for Children Collaborative with UNICEF, we are absolutely focused on responsible innovation and having a golden thread of responsibility for our projects. And we've got a very practical assessment, very accessible. And the point of building it in a really accessible, almost friendly manner, there's not a huge amount of paperwork for project teams to fill out. It's something that we're trying to encourage them to use to add value to their project. So how can you reshape the design of the project that you're delivering for social good by utilizing a tool like an ethical assessment to improve it, and not seeing things as obstacles or barriers, and not looking at GDPR and the legal side? This is really about the socio-ethical questions that we're trying to get people to think about, wider stakeholder relationships, wider unintended harms, but doing it in a way that means, because we pull together collaborative teams, and we've got teams from academia, from public sector, from private sector, these people aren't necessarily used to working on projects that have children as their audience, as their beneficiaries, right? So we're pulling in somebody who's working on climate change and geophysical hazards to work on something to do with children. So how can we get the language right and get their slant on the work that they're doing so that they understand the societal impact of any work that they're part of. And for us, it's all about improving the ethical literacy of the people working on the project and doing that in a really practical manner. We've built up our assessment, which we're really pleased with, and we make sure that it's not a one-stop shop. So it's not, we'll just do it at the front end of the project, get approval and bash on. It's very much like, this is about evolving the project. Let's do it at the beginning. Let's take a checkpoint in the middle. Let's do it before the end, so we understand communication, publication, results, assumption that's been made throughout the project delivery. And so that's something that we really want to champion for others to bounce off the back of that.
That sounds fantastic. I wonder what the role children are playing in this process. Do you invite children? Do parents take part of it? And what's the feedback of having children in the center of the design consideration?
So that's another really key part, and it's another like tick box-ish type of activity. So participation is so important and so vital at the right time, in the right way, for the right reason. So quite often when we set out, we'd hear a lot of people going, oh, you need to involve youth, you need to involve youth, you need to involve youth. And they would keep saying it, and we'd say, well, why? How that might be done appropriately. And nobody really had a good answer for how that might be done appropriately. So what we've developed is a youth engagement workbook, and it's a series of questions that a project team asks itself about, wait a minute, why do we want to involve youths on this? Is it because it's the right, like it would be great to say we've involved youth, or is it actually going to inform the context of the project and the cultural understanding that we need to deliver that project, or is it to actually for the design purpose? So we've got a sort of matrix of questions and then responses to how we should involve youth. And then we've got UNICEF brilliantly in country offices across 190 countries of the world who are able to then facilitate how we can do that and bring youths into projects. But I'm really keen to emphasize, it's not just, oh, I've done my ethics and I've done my
ethics. Exactly. That sounds like a great resource. Do you have it publicly available on your site? Can people go and consult it, and then why not use it in their own project? Because I wonder how much of an impact will have to consider children and young people into the design for a lot of the digital products. You know, I'm thinking that when YouTube and Facebook have designed YouTube for kids and Facebook for kids, they were caught by surprise that in the end, children ended up using the big YouTube and the big Facebook. So I wonder if by having those consideration in the tools that were not intendedly designed for children wouldn't make a positive impact on how responsibly those tools are being designed. Alice, over to you. Now you are managing a social enterprise that's called AI for Good UK that does fantastic work in building products for the most vulnerable in society. And I know that you're very passionate about the subject, and you put a lot of heart and energy in the past few years, not only in those initiatives, but also educating and bringing awareness about this topic. But still, there's something else for us to be done when it comes of building AI in the social enterprise sector. Is how do we look at best practices from the industry and being able to adapt it to social context in a way that creates sustainability. And when I say sustainability, I'm thinking, what about the environmental impact of training a model, and how can we build technologies without replicating and reinventing the wheel, and benefiting from the best practices, not only in different sectors, but also different parts of the world. What are your thoughts around those issues?
No, I completely agree. And I would say that, every time we design a new AI for good technology, we have to consider not only the social impact, the positive social impact that we would like to make with it, but also like the ethical aspects, such as, leaving no one behind and making sure it's not harming anyone. But increasingly, it's becoming more and more important today, the sustainable factors. And for us, it's usually the three aspects of this problem that we have to look at. So the first one is the actual supply chain. So I don't know if you are aware, but we as an industry, as a tech industry, are responsible for around 4% of global electricity consumption. It's 1.4 in terms of carbon emissions and 4 in terms of greenhouse emissions. And at least the last one is like 1.5% more than the aviation. And it kind of like tells us that, we are not, doing great as an industry. So we have to do something about becoming more responsible. And especially when it comes to kind of humanitarian sector and international development sector. So we have to look at both the hardware and software parts, how they're being produced, how, the resources are being extracted. So for example, we know that, on average, it's 25 kilos of raw resources that are being extracted from Earth just to produce one smartphone. So every time we build like an app, which is designed to be compatible only with the latest, OS system or the device type, we are not contributing in the best possible way to the sustainability and like reducing, waste. Another important aspect of it is obviously data storage and energy usage. So knowing that AI is particularly data and energy greedy, we just have to be, smart about it. How do we use it? And like equally as, the creation of waste and, hardware devices, we also need to think of what happens to the data after it's being stored for 3 years and being used. According to GDPR, we have to, either move it to cold storage or completely delete it. So how is it being deleted? We know that in the past, a lot of industries actually had to literally, destroy the hard drives just to make sure they're compliant. And, again, how much waste it created, but also to maintain all these data centers that we are now using to run AI algorithms constantly and create ever more powerful, I would say, AI technologies. We also need to use a lot of energy, and it means also like cooling it down and water sometimes used. Like what kind of energy are we using? Is it renewable, not renewable? So all these questions have to be asked along the way. And finally, as you mentioned, the duplication is the one huge problem, specifically in the social sector, because usually, like it's very normal to have competition and to have more providers available to you because it makes the technology or any service more affordable. But in the social sector, where we have a lot of information asymmetry and the lack of responsibility as well, sometimes we see some things being provided to charities for free, for example, because big technology companies can just afford it. Why not, right? The problem is that a lot of times these technologies are not fit for purpose. So you, as a charity, have to spend a lot of money and resources to just customize the solutions and make sure that they are not harming anyone. They're done ethically, right? So you have to do a lot of customization. And this obviously like drains resources, but most importantly, why don't we just use something that is already working in this area? Why don't we just like share expertise? We share the learning, we open source this technology, and we make sure that, as a sector, we just like become slightly smarter, especially when it comes to using AI in such fields as like, tackling COVID or inequality or climate change. Why don't we just like, create better global scale collaborations and just, scale this solutions from one area to the other quickly, rather than, redesigning or like starting from scratch every time? Because, why? What's the point of that? And finally, I would like to say that AI is designed to bring us to better efficiency and sustainability. There's definitely this capacity. So why don't we, as a sector, especially like AI technologists, like, just, leverage this opportunity? We all know the famous case of like how DeepMind helped Google to save energy in their data centers. Why don't we do the same every time? Why don't we leverage this technology to actually help us become smarter? So that would be my take on that.
I think if I were to play back what you're saying is that we have all the solution in hand, but we're not very good at sharing those solutions and being able to collaborate and adapt it to a certain context. And I wonder, have you had any positive example where we actually done it and we've done it right? Because on one hand, you've described a sectorial issue, right? It's the social enterprise sectorial problems. Each of the sectors will have their own dealing with new technologies, but on the other hand, you have this new generation, as I call it, the Greta Thunberg generation, that is much more incentivized towards working social goals rather than on social societal goal rather than personal goals. And I wonder, how can we harness this enormous energy that comes from the new generation and desire to make the right thing, to do the right thing with the help of technologies, but also in the same time address the structural sectorial problems by good practices. So is there anyone else out there you've encountered that could show us the way, how to do it, how to harness all this energy, all those different knowledge that exist, and being able to support the problem owners at the other end of the globe to achieve results? And we're not talking about, solving the big problems of humanity. I think solving the way to solve big problems is to bite-size them into local problems with local solutions. So is there any hope? Have you see anyone that we can look up to and say, yay, cheers?
To be honest, every single area, like, problem area, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, in every country, it has to be like a local solution in any case, because otherwise it's just not adopted well or deployed well. So I can tell you there's so many, especially young people. So talking about the energy, there's so many young people engaged in these areas. I know like a number of companies that are using AI for, farming and, subsistence, like farming, for example, in Africa. I know people like tackling bullying and harassment in the Asian countries like Pakistan and Malaysia and a lot of other. I know some people like and companies actually dealing with data for good issues in the very good way, creating cross collaboration between, again, different stakeholders, collecting data and making sure that the data is more representative, so that the AI that we train is more kind of like less biased, more fair to people. So like there's so many kind of examples, like if I will start talking about it, I'll never be able to cover them all. But to be honest, the best way is to always like look at what works and like hear it from the beneficiaries themselves, actually. And if that works, bring all those young people, activists, people that challenge you on board, because it's the way to scale. It's the way to bring this technology to other areas, make sure that it works in other countries. So there's always like some local context kind of customization requirement that needs to happen all the time, just based on our experience. But definitely the energy is there, the solution part is there. We just need to have the will. And I think as a tech industry as well, we need to not to push for like our solutions to be used as, they're cheaper, more affordable or something, but actually listen to those that are using this technology and making sure it's user-led rather than the other way around.
Fantastic. And if there's the one thing that I will encourage you all in the audience to do is actually look for those use cases, because those use cases or examples are so powerful, not only to show the light that AI can and is used in delivering good in the society, but also empower people to join this revolution. I know that many girls are not empowered to join a STEM career because they don't see how tech is being used for the good of society. So only if we would make all those cases more popular and available to all those youngsters that are preparing to choose a career, will be in a better place. But Branka, now over to you. You're the founder and the director of an enterprise that has a best name possible, AI for Peace. Right? We've went from discussing AI for good into something much more concrete. How can we use technologies like AI and data science not only for defense or weaponry application, but to preserve peace, right? Because ultimately, many of us agree that potentially preserving peace is much more important than keeping weapons with AI. So how do we rebalance? How do we reclaim the narrative? We've seen too much of a focus on AI in the military and so little focus on using emerging technologies and preserving peace.
Thank you so much, Maria, and thank you for this great intro. You raised so many important things that we exactly want to cover at AI for Peace and exactly reclaim this narrative that I think was, in a way, hijacked, not only from the military field, but in general, when we talk about peace, we realize that not that many people are actually aware what peace means today, and quite too often we identify this immediately with wars and a sort of an opposite to war. But there are so many things, Maria, as you said, in this notion of sustaining peace, of actually concentrating even on societies who are currently in peace, but very disturbed by certain trends. And we can react on time to these trends. So this was one of the motivations for us to actually start this more structured work in that direction. And it is, of course, connected with AI for Good, the entire movement. Alice mentioned SDGs. Not many people in AI field actually even are connecting AI for Good with Sustainable Development Goals. There are maybe some other notions of what AI for good or AI for social good means. So I think there is a value maybe, and if we have time to go completely back in this discussion of trying to see, do we actually agree what AI for good means, and why is there such an opposite movement as well, like a sort of anti-discourse to this application coming from big tech companies. So why we need to explain that AI for good is not only the big tech companies streamed AI for good, but the work that Alex is doing and Alice is doing as well, and so on. But let me come back maybe just to tell the audience or to position maybe myself in the topic as well. So I am coming from the peace building and conflict prevention work. So I worked previously in conflict and post-conflict areas. I worked with vulnerable populations, with refugees and migrants. And what we realized is actually how much our field is impacted by new technologies. And I'm saying new technologies because it actually comes much before the AI started being such a popular topic, so to say. So we really, and quite often we work in low tech settings as well. So we even start with, just trying to utilize mobile phones, not even thinking about machine learning or the big data processing and analysis and so on. And I truly think there is a value, a really positive value that we can get out of these technologies. And Maria, I completely agree and echo your point that we need to emphasize positive examples. And this is what we are trying to do at AI for Peace. So when we entered the field, we realized that there is a lot of talk and space dedicated, and not only discourse, but money as well, financial part that goes to military sector and to AI applications in military, but we don't see these applications coming in sustaining peace or how we call it a peace building. So maybe just to bring this notion of peace building closer to this audience as well. So what we mean by peace building is, how do we avoid violent conflict? How do we provide the tools for building something that is just more than just the absence of war? So through peace building, we are trying to strengthen capacities as well to manage conflicts. So conflicts are not necessarily a bad. There is a possibility, from every crisis that we go out on a better, with something better, with something what we are trying to do from COVID now as well, like trying to build the system better out of the crisis. So this is exactly what we are trying to do with peace building as well, and also to lay the foundations for this sustainable development. So this is why this peace moment is important to sustainable development goals. And what we are trying to do is definitely utilize the potentials of new technologies. So we see the trends in computer processing and the availability of data, of course, machine learning capabilities. And then we are overlaying this with all of the problems that we are facing in our field. So why many people ask why now, like this is not a new topic, sustaining peace. Why now? Why peace? So when we look into some data and some trends, unfortunately they're not really a good one. So we are living in a less peaceful world today, and the average level of peacefulness in all of the parts of the world deteriorated, and the world continues to be less peaceful than even 10 years ago. We see the unprecedented humanitarian crisis. So the number of people that are really in need of urgent humanitarian help is increasing every single year. And this is why we need to act as well. We can look into the democracy as well, just to show how multi-layer this notion of peace is. Democracy is really important part of sustaining peace, and even there we see the deterioration, not only in non-democratic regimes or emerging democracies. We can see the trends in democratic countries as well. So because of all of these problems, we are looking into allies, so to say, and we see that AI can potentially be one of these allies. Maria, feel free to interrupt me. I can talk a lot about this. It's a big topic. And I just want to emphasize how glad I am to talk with you and Alex and Alice, because I see so many interconnected points out here, and I'm really looking forward to actually going into the discussion with all four of us, of course.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Branka. And while we were talking, I was thinking, one question that came up in my mind is like, who's missing from the conversation on AI for peace, right? The civil society is there, maybe the industry, because ultimately they are the one powering those technology. But who else is missing to make a difference?
No, it's quite interesting, Maria, that this question has different answers in different parts of the world, and that's why I like how in your reflection to Alice's introduction, you mentioned the importance of context as well. So we often lose the notion of how these topics and how the situation is developing differently in different parts of the world. So if I have to generalize, I would definitely say that users or the people who are directly impacted by the technologies need to have bigger voice in this. The vulnerable populations, of course, we often see the situations where they are used as a test beds for certain technologies. And it's not that they don't have a voice, they do. We just need to make sure that we don't suffocate that voice with different external factors that are out there. But definitely context is important, and I agree, Alice, absolutely. We should use the existing systems that are out there. We should just be very careful how do we apply these systems in different contexts in different countries and parts of the world as well.
I think that ultimately we should focus on the positive, as the fact that AI is bringing some immense benefits and challenges, and we should be we should be up for it. And that's an interesting question we got from the audience, asking us if we believe that the benefits of AI outweigh the disadvantages that cause, and what will happen in 10 years' time. And I think it's a great question to be answered from your own context. What do you think, in using data for children, in the social enterprise and for peace? Do the advantages outweigh the risk, and what do you think will happen in the next 10 years? Alex, you want to go on first, please?
Yeah, so a great question, and I think we are the people that are empowered to make sure that the benefits outweigh the disadvantages in our roles, in our leadership roles in these areas. I'm really encouraged in terms of the Data for Children Collaborative by the fact that we are funded by the Scottish Government, and I think governments are taking more of a pragmatic and practical view of how we're using AI, how they're setting up strategies, national strategies, how they're setting up policies, and how they're trying to talk to their citizens about it. So increasing awareness of knowledge of activities that people are doing within a country is massively important. And I think, as I mentioned before, that ethics, increasing people's awareness of ethics so that we are making sure we're focused on the benefits and we understand the potential harms and we're mitigating against them, then that's going to be the key to making this the long term for societal good.
Fantastic. Alice, any comments from the social enterprise?
Sure. So basically, AI for Good is focused on delivering AI-powered solutions that are sustainable, ethical, and scalable to the most vulnerable and underserved. And we basically, in our mission, which is about helping 100 million people by 2030, we kind of like try to embody this notion of like bringing more benefits of using AI than kind of like the risks. Every time I speak to the charity sector, for example, I'm challenged on so many fronts of like, risk here, risk there, risk with the data, so many risks, honestly. It makes my job like more interesting, to be honest. I actually enjoy it the most. It's my favorite part of the role, is actually to address these questions. And I'm really happy that, the sector that I'm working in is so concerned about the safety and the better equality and, other aspects of like making life better for those people that are vulnerable, but also like for the planet. And in general, kind of like, I would say, our job is to unpack this, risks and to be completely transparent about the flaws, because technology is not a magic bullet. It's just a tool. It depends how we use it a lot. And I would say that majority of time, the partners that we have, we take them on a journey. So we have to bring them with us. We have to educate them on all the kind of like this nuances of this technology, how to use it, how to make it more affordable, how to make it less kind of like causing some like worse effects for the nature and for the environment. And all these things, you have to unpack them together, and you have to, kind of do the audit of different kind of like systems and make sure that, your partner is understanding the black box basically behind it. And another interesting kind of like part of this is also to use the simple applications of narrow AI, because they are more or less understood. We understand like, what input brings what output, and we can kind of control the system for now. So obviously, when we play with this complex technology in the social sector, in the humanitarian aid, development aid areas, we have to make sure it's like simple, stupid almost, so that it doesn't break anything. So I would suggest that, going for sophisticated AI, such as like, all this new like GPT systems, it's the, definitely where you need the, governments involved, where you need the global civil society involved, when you need like a lot of stakeholders to actually like laser focus on what's actually doing and what it's helping you to achieve. But when you are looking at the local kind of like application of AI on the ground for a specific problem, you just need to make sure that your partners are happy, the users of this technology are happy, that you bring them all on the journey, and you kind of make sure it's all transparent. So this is probably my recipe for to make sure that the benefits outweigh the risks in AI in the next 10 years.
Of common sense, right? A lot of common sense, what you were saying. So we just need to educate people to make sure that they understand what this technology is, what it does, and how can we use it in conjunction with other elements to build sustainable solution, but also be honest and transparent about, what I use it for, and don't punch above your weight. And I think those are, such great advice, not only for the social sector, but I'm thinking even for private sector, how many of our clients in PwC will want to fly before they know how to walk, and they will want to use sophisticated solution powered by AI when they're not ready yet to handle more basic automation, for example. But Branka, over to you. How do you think that risks and benefits could be balanced in the right way in the AI for Peace?
Thank you, Maria. And I thank you so much for posing this question. I don't see it as a sort of a static question. I think it's very hard to answer this question with a final yes or no. Finally, it will be more beneficial than it will be detrimental. I think this is a sort of an ongoing process that we need to tackle on a literally daily basis, and then think about short-term and long-term consequences. And as both Alex and Alice said, just make sure that we constantly think not only about AI for good. It's not enough to think about positive applications and to work in this field, but to constantly think about risks as well. And that's a sort of another side of the story. And what I think is, these technologies, all of the technologies under the AI umbrella are here. So it's really up to us to question them all the time, and even to ask, Maria, as you said, should this be tackled in this way? Like, is this really necessary? Is this the only way to tackle this problem? And then I think that too often we are tackling deep social problems that are embedded in the structure of our societies. We think we will be able to tackle them with AI solutions or technical solutions, and I think this is this risk, not needed risk that we are bringing to the field. And on top of that, of course, we have unintentional consequences. So often we are actually working on AI for good projects. We heard this example of a climate change, and how this is even you have two sides of the story. So you have to ask this question all the time and to see how to do both, to make sure that the risks that you're bringing in the field are actually not bigger than the benefits that you're getting out of this. So it's sort of a similar, I see it like a similar as the democracy that I mentioned at the beginning. You don't become a democratic society and you put a full stop to this. It's a continuous process. So the same here. You continuously have to think about both risks and benefits coming from this.
Which, going back to the points Alex and Alice made earlier about educating, it means how do we stimulate a certain type of behavior that acknowledges that technology comes with strings attached. It's not only about moving fast and breaking things, it's about the consequences of those actions. Since we only have a few minutes left, time flies so quickly when you're having fun. I want to give 2 minutes or so for each of you with a bit of a call for action. I really love our conversation because it was so practical, and we were able to really dig deep into some issues from your perspective. If you will be looking at your audience and you'll be able to see them, what would you want to leave them with this Friday afternoon or morning as a call to action? What should they do from Monday onwards after they enjoy the weekend, so that we all contribute much more to the causes of using AI for good? Alex.
So my call to action would be to ask people to think outside their day job, because there's no doubt they will have skills and expertise that they can add to what we're working on in terms of our organizations. So we're a data collaborative. We bring all types of people in together to work on projects. So I would ask you to come and look at our latest call to action on, and we release these like monthly, 2 months every so often. We've got a new challenge question, and we want all sorts of people to come and help us answer those questions.
Superb. Go and work with Alex and promote the work Alex is doing. Alice, over to you.
So my advice is always, about starting small. So don't need to think about, AI for good as like this big complex thing, and like you need to tackle some grand, challenge with your idea, or like, for example, even if you want to navigate your company to do something for good, you don't need to start in a huge kind of problem space. You actually can look at the smaller kind of like parts of this problem and try to kind of like contribute to the one of these parts, basically. And with SDGs, it's very simple. You can just go to the website. There are 17 goals. Within each of the goal, there are like sub-targets, and you can look at the target and you can see how you can contribute to the smaller part of the problem. And another thing is like, don't be afraid. So this is what I'm always telling to our partners, charities, and everyone that we bring on the board. Like it's really important not to be afraid, not to be shy, to ask questions, not to be afraid to challenge, technologies specifically, about their technology. Like, because a lot of people, they just, when it comes to AI, they're super afraid that it's like, only for certain people to understand it. It's maybe only PhDs that can ask these questions, because it's so hard to understand what it actually do. And to be honest with you, I think there's no stupid question. For technologists in general, I think there's no such notion as question could be stupid, because this is how they learn and how they produce technology. So I think we always are happy to answer all questions, and let's become partners. Let's take you on a journey, and eventually you'll get there. And I think let's just not be afraid of like using this for good. I think that would be my suggestion.
Perfect. I hope you'll not feel overwhelmed by the calls for collaboration after this panel. But if you do, I think it's a good problem to have. Branka, over to you for the last remarks.
Thank you. Well, I will echo what Alice said, not only maybe extend this, not only about the PhD people, like how quite often we hear this. So no, this is such a complicated topic. We don't know about this. I think this is something that we need to get as a message as well, that the AI is not only the thing only for computer sciences anymore. So in whichever field you're working in, as Alex said, you have a voice in this, and AI is impacting, maybe you're not aware of this, but even in this moment, it is impacting your work and your life, wherever you are, in developed countries and developing countries. So we need to have more of these voices and more diversity and more inclusion coming to this space. And then if I talk directly to data scientists in our audience, I would invite them to think about becoming more peace builders themselves, just taking into consideration that their technologies and the data science they're working on should be not only ethical and having this human rights dimension, but also be peaceful and actually contribute to sustaining peace.
Loved it. I feel so wired. Now I want to come and work with you guys, only if I had 24 more hours in my day. But since we're running out of time, I want to thank you very much for your contribution and for bringing a big smile on my face. Before our session, I was very much in a session discussing about the risks of AI, and suddenly now I can see, the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's fantastic. Thank you very much, and thank you to all that have followed us this Friday afternoon, morning, and hope you have a wonderful weekend, and see you guys soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your questions.
Yeah, thanks everyone.